So it's not like, ooh, no. Hi, my name is Inshalati. Welcome to also the book club. So in today's video, we're going to be doing the month of May's monthly wrap up. And in this wrap up, as per previous wrap ups, we're going to be splitting the video in two different sections. We're going to have the grades, which have 3.5 stars and 4-star rated books. And then we have our mids. In the mids, I have my 3-star books. I don't have any 2 stars this month. So if we had 2 stars, they would sit in there. And then we'd have DNFs, which are books that I'm not even willing to rate because I have not finished. So we're going to have those books in there. Stay tuned while I talk about these books. If this is something you'd enjoy hanging around with me for, hang around. If you want to like the video, like it. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to subscribe and share the video with all your friends. The first book on our list is Hooked by Asoko Yuzuki. This is a Japanese author. And I genuinely enjoy Japanese writers because they have a way of talking about topics that is somewhat different to the way other people write in different parts of the world. And I genuinely enjoy what they do in Japan, especially their authors, because they tackle conversations in not necessarily a simplistic way, but in a very relatable way for you and I to sit back and be like, okay, even though this is set up in a world some of us have never been to, like Japan, and it is not your standard West country or Western country, you find yourself enjoying the stories that come out of the authors there. And so when I saw this book in a bookstore, I was like, I definitely need to find this book and read it for myself. So I picked it up. It's called Hooked. And I think this is the book after Bata. So Bata is I believe her debut novel, which I'm reading right now. And it's starting off very, very interesting, but that's not why we're here today. So in Hooked, we look at 2 women who are navigating adult female friendships. And people like to fuss about how difficult adult female friendships can be, but that's because there are so many things tied to that particular aspect of life. And so Hooked looks at that as I think your main theme of the story, but it tackles things like obsession, how one friend can be obsessed with another friend because they believe that I really, really need to keep this friendship going. I need to keep her around because it kind of solidifies that I'm not too difficult to be around. So that's the dynamic you find in this particular situation where Eriko, despite being a professional career woman, finds herself obsessed with this woman named Shoko, who is a stay-at-home, lazy wife blogger. So you already think, wait, wouldn't Shoko be the one who is not necessarily envious, but who's enamored by Eriko's life? You'd assume that. But in this particular story, you find the switch in that particular relationship. And the switch kind of introduces a lot of situations where you find somebody who's high-powered in a professional setup, finding it very, very difficult to make friends. Like, we were all taught as kids how to make friends. And then when you become an adult, you realize how difficult it is to go and do it on your own without your parents pushing you towards their friends as kids. And so that's one of the situations that get explored in this book. Another thing that I found really, really interesting were the rigid gender roles that get talked about in the story. You find a situation where someone as high-powered as Eriko wasn't in a relationship, and the reason she wasn't in a relationship is because she's a very, very difficult person to get along with. And so you're like, okay, her being single kind of puts a stigma on her that kind of also keeps people away. But even when she has people, she treats them badly. So you're like, is it the gender role, or is it who she is, or is it a good combination of the two? So that book was very, very interesting from that perspective. But the thing that shocked me a lot was that I walked into the story thinking Ergo was going to be the perpetrator of like all the bad things that happen in the story. But as you continue reading the story, you realize that both of these women are just trying to make connections with other people in the world, and they just struggle to do that. One, for Ergo, she's a little bit difficult, whereas Shoko has this weird idea in her mind that I don't really need other people as long as my significant other loves me. So she's the same kind of person who believes as long as people who I love me, that's more than enough. I don't need friends. I don't need female companionship outside of the relationship I have. That makes her very, very unlikable because she's like, I don't need to socialize with people past this. She doesn't make an effort, and that makes her very, very difficult to become friends with. And so when you watch Shoko try and be friends with Ergo and it doesn't go well, you're like, in some ways it's because Ergo is a crazy person, and then Shoko is crazy in her own way where she believes she doesn't need people. But then once you go through the story, you realize it's because her father raised her like that. Her father treated his significant others, and by extension Shoko's mom, as if he didn't need them. And so they left, because you can't be with somebody who always thinks that I don't need you, even though there are things you do for them that kind of contradict that particular statement. So I really, really enjoyed that story. I loved the humanity of it all, where at the end of the day, you realize these are two sad women, and not just one is obsessed with another person, and the parasocial relationship kind of went too far. It never goes too far. And I loved it. The only reason this book is a 4 out of 5 for me and not a 5 out of 5 is because there are certain storylines that I feel like we could have definitely left out that don't really impact this main storyline. So it's like, what are we doing? Is it going to give us more of a sense of the kind of person Shoko or Eriko is? Not necessarily. You can already see it in the dynamic between Shoko and Eriko. So why are we doing this extra side plot? And there were some topics where things just kind of like end without any like explosion. But maybe that's me. I read too many books where big things are happening. So was I expecting something big? Because in this particular story, if something big happened, somebody was going to be scarred for life. It's those really, really dark type of endings with these things if it were to be explosive, right? If that makes sense. So if you think an obsession storyline, things have to go really, really bad. But in this particular situation, you have Ergo realizing that it's not worth all the trouble that she's putting in. So anything past you know what, it's okay, go away, kind of like feels like a deflated storyline. But at the same time, it's like, how bad would I have wanted something bad to happen to Shoko or to Ergo for me to feel like this is a satisfying story, you know? But it was a good story. It was a good story. I'm really, really excited to read Butter. It's a good one that I've started like probably today. So I'm really, really excited to go into that. The next book on our list is In Berlin by Eric Silberstein. It was a 4-star read, and I loved it. And I loved it. And I loved it. So In Berlin is a literary fiction with a little bit of romance, just a tiny bit, just enough for me not to go and roll my eyes the entire time, because like my distaste for romance right now is just like this high. But I don't want to... I just enjoyed the story. So basically what the story is about 2 women. One is Anna. So Anna recently had a stroke in her spine, which has resulted in her becoming tetraplegic. And tetraplegic basically means from the neck down, you can't move any of your limbs and your body below your neck. or below your head. So she goes into the hospital because one day she just felt like something was not right. And when she gets to the hospital trying to get help, they tell her, bro, it's because you have had a stroke. And by that point, none of her limbs were working, which was very, very crazy because it means that she went from like work, got into a train and felt sick. So she decided, let me go to the hospital. Had she not, what was going to happen was she just going to drop down and just like staring at people scared in the streets. So I'm very, very glad she went to the hospital when she felt like a little bit of pain in her body that she had never experienced before. And then because she can't live alone anymore, she stays in the hospital for like months on end. And while she is staying in the hospital, she meets this Muslim Syrian refugee woman named Batul. Batul is, she's amazing. So Batul is trying to become a doctor, but the education that she had in Syria is not able to be transferred into credits in Germany, where she has moved for refuge. The reason she moved to Germany was because just after the Arab Spring came into Syria, which were the protests for a revolution in the Middle East, I believe it is, her brother got captured, and once the brother got released, her family was just like, we need to get out of this place. This place has become very, very dangerous. And so her father decided, we're leaving. So they moved from Syria, they moved to Turkey. Then I think after Turkey, they moved to Germany, where they are right now. So because she's trying to become a doctor, one of her mentors told her, hey, find a job in the medical space, because obviously you can't become a nurse or a doctor. Find something in that space. So she became a cleaner in the hospital. And one of the floors she cleans is the floor that Anna lives in. Yeah, she lives in. So on her rounds, she meets Anna, and Anna's like, dude, can you please just like scratch my eyebrow? Like, I think we take for granted these little things where I can use my hands, like right now, to make a lot of gestures, but somebody who's tetraplegic is unable to do such a simple task. So that's how they become friends. Batul comes in, speaks to Anna, takes her to physiotherapy, and so that she doesn't miss physiotherapy, because over time she starts to get like feeling in like small parts of her body. Like at first, I think it's her like hand, and so they go and train that at physiotherapy. And Anna's one of those active people who met her own girlfriend while she was doing something really, really active, and so was such a good story. It was such a good story because you watch her strength and her resilience to get back to the life that she initially had, or some semblance of a normal life. And you follow this woman do that with the support of her family and her friends, and still feel like at times she is unable to like pick her own self up. But then you have Batul there to kind of speak to her, help her through this tough time, especially because Anna's parents can't stay in the hospital 24/7. But Batul, when she's at work, outside of visiting hours, can still visit Anna. So they create this friendship where Anna is also teaching Batul how to speak German, because they speak to each other in English. But when she's trying to learn German, Anna teaches Batul how to speak German, and over time she gets better. She's still in some sort of college and school of sorts, because like there's a bit of an issue with like transferring her credits. And so you watch this friendship bloom, and because I know the kind of books and the kind of things that happen in books, I knew where the story was going. There's a little bit of a romance, but it's a bit of a forbidden romance because, as mentioned, Batul is a Muslim woman, whereas Anna is a lesbian woman. So by definition, it's already forbidden for Batul to go into a relationship with another woman, and then because she's going to lose everything. She's going to lose her family. She's going to lose her community. She's going to lose her faith in pursuing this type of relationship. So there are hard questions that we tackle in this particular story, and I really, really enjoy it. If I could read the story one more time for the first time, I'd be so happy, because it's so heartwarming, man. It's beautiful. When I'm thinking about it right now, I'm just like, And the only reason that it's not a 5-star read is because I am a very difficult person to impress in terms of like books. So it takes a really, really special book, but this is very, very close to that. So give it a try if you're looking for some tetraplegia in your stories, some good friendship, some human resilience, some beautiful stuff, man. Beautiful stuff. Next book on our list is A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck. This is an exciting one for me because it was the inspiration for my new series on my channel called Book Shorties. I went out looking for like short novels that I could like read and talk about on my channel, and this was the first one I came across, and I'm really, really excited that I came across this book because it's different. It is what is dubbed a philosophical horror novel, right? Like the reason it's philosophical in nature is because it tackles a lot of existential crisis-y type of discussions. This person that we're following, I don't think I remember what this character's name was because we are in his head for so much of the time that we don't actually get an opportunity to find out what his name is. But he is a man that has been sent to hell, right? And this hell is no hell like he had been taught as a Mormon man. And now it is kind of messing with his sense of identity. So imagine if you were born a particular faith or religion, you're taught that faiths, practices and cultures and shared customs and all of that stuff, then you find out that one of the core things that holds this whole thing together is that when you die, you get to end up with the guy you've been worshipping all this time, with all the people who have believed the same things that you have been believing in, and you're going to have a great afterlife. You find out that that's not really the true afterlife that comes. So that's basically what happens in the story. This man finds out that his religion might have been like sourced from the one true religion, but it wasn't the one true religion. And by definition of faith and religion, if you don't follow the practices of the one true religion, which in this case is called Zoroastrianism, then I guess you're going to hell. So that's what happened to this guy. He goes to hell, and in this particular hell, it is not designed by the Mormon God. It is designed by the great God of Zoroastrianism. And so everybody who did not follow those practices may accidentally have kind of sent themselves to hell. So it is also said that this religion only is observed in parts of the world like India or Iran, I think it's Iran or Iraq. I don't remember. But basically that's what happened. And so that's why he's in hell. But unlike your fire and brimstone type of hell, your hell is determined by something you like. So this man really, really enjoyed reading books. So of course they put him in the library. The library is so big, right? It is so big, and it is based off of the book by somebody. I think his name was Borg or something. And the library is like based off of the Library of Babel, if I'm not mistaken. And basically in the Library of Babel, there are all types of books that one could conceive of in this particular library. They're all like 410 pages, and they have a specific number of characters. And those characters can start from just A's in the entire book, or B's in the entire book, or an alternate of both of those letters, like A, B, A, B, A, B, until we get to page 410. Or we could have like unintelligible symbols all the way up to 410 pages. So understand you have books with such random things. So obviously when you think about it, you're like, okay, what is the task in this particular hell if it's not your burn in eternity type of hell? The task in this particular hell is for you to find your life story that doesn't have any mistakes, any corrections, anything. And until you find that, you can never leave this hell. So unlike your burn for eternity type of hells, you are at least given the sense of hope that you will leave if you just find your life story. And so people go into this hell and they try and find their life story. But imagine trying to find your life story in a library that has the number of books that are equal to a number that is 2.5 million digits long. So, like, if you think about what I'm saying, you might be like, 2.5 million shouldn't be too many. If the number 1 has 1 digit in it, the number 100 has 3 digits in it, the number 6 million has 7 digits in it. Do you see? Your mind can't comprehend how big that number is. And that is the trick to this hell. And that's the hell. That's the horror of this hell. That you are tasked to look for your life story in a place that has so many books. When will you ever get out? And the caveat to this is that you can never die. If you do die, you'll be up in the morning. And that was the crazy thing about the story. So you find yourself exploring different questions like, does infinity and finite even mean any different if you're telling me there is a finite number of books, but the number is so incomprehensible that it might as well be infinity itself, right? The space that they're in is so large that at some point certain groups of people decided, hey, we're gonna go and see if we can find the end of the library. It took some groups 50 years to go and come back, and they never found it. They never found it in any direction. When one falls over the railing to get to the bottom, you could fall for light years, for eons. That's how big this place is. And they're asking you to find your book. That's the trick to this hell. That's the horror of it, that you will never leave. You will never really leave. But this guy says at some point in the book, he goes, I'm going to keep trying to look for my book because I really, really need to get out of here. And I'm hoping when I get out of here, I see something that I recognize from all the teachings that I learned from my faith, because I'm holding on to nothing else right now. I have no hope in this vast expanse of a library. So what else is there for me to do but look for my story? Crazy. I love this story so much. I loved it. The next book on our list is Help Wanted by Adelle Waldman. And this was a 3.5 star read. It was a contemporary novel that I loved, right? And the reason I loved this one is because it's not the same as the other one. It just explores people working in a warehouse. So think of a warehouse in a huge supermarket. There are people in the back who get the deliveries from the big trucks and unpack those boxes and then take those items from the box and then put them on the shelves. Those are the people that we're focusing on. This book was written in the third person perspective, and because it's written in the third person perspective, we don't just follow one person's perspective, we follow every single person in that particular warehouse. And it's so fun when we're just jumping between people. So if somebody has an assumption over a particular matter, the third person perspective automatically switches to that other person saying, I don't think that's true, but in their mind, which we don't really get in a first person perspective. In a first person perspective novel, you're following one person, so whatever thoughts they have, whatever assumptions they have, they are theirs. All of them belong to that particular person. So even if you might disagree with them, you don't have any evidence other than what the narrator is telling you is happening. Whereas in a third person perspective, I might say, hey, I really, really like donuts. And I know James likes donuts too. And then we jump to James's perspective and he's like, I don't really like donuts, but I keep saying yes because I really, really like this girl. You see, it's that kind of thing. And I enjoy that. And the story was very, very fun because you find these warehouse workers not liking their boss. And so they're trying to get their boss promoted to store manager. So their boss is not necessarily directly in charge of them anymore. So they scheme and do all of these weird things. And you're like, this is what's fun about like reading about normal people in like normal work situations. Because you find how sometimes they go out of their way to do all of these things. And sometimes their plans work and sometimes their plans don't work. And you hear all these different people's motivations for why they want this person to get promoted, why they don't want this person to get promoted. But at the center of all of this, you realize when your boss gets promoted, there's obviously a position open. So everybody wants that position. And that's why they're trying to get their boss pushed up, and not just because they don't like their boss anymore. And that was so fun. I enjoyed it. And I really thought that I had figured it out. And then at the end, something just happened. And I'm like, yes, I'm glad it happened the way it happened. But like, That's why I like to read like different types of books. And recently, because of what happened with like my reading apps, I haven't been able to kind of choose the book. So I'm kind of forced to like pick out of really, really random catalogs. And this is a really, really great find for me. So really, really enjoyed this one. The last book in the great section is going to be The Girl from London by Olivia Spooner. This book is so cute. So cute. So this is a historical fiction. So we're dealing with times during the war, right? So specifically World War II. So if you know the history of World War II, you know that parts of Europe were getting bombed by the German forces. So presidents and governments were all finding and thinking about ways to essentially protect as many of their people as possible. So one of the things that Churchill did, which was the prime minister of the UK at the time, or was it Britain, or I don't know what's happening with that Commonwealth. Like, I don't understand how they split them up. I know the United Kingdom is bigger than England, which is bigger than, I don't know what the other one is, but there's just so many happening there. But yeah, Churchill decided, hey, let's protect the kids. And so what we're going to do is send the kids to the Dominions, right? Basically, quote unquote, the countries that Britain was essentially the owner of in like legal terms, but like they didn't want to say it like that, but that's essentially what was happening. So we're going to send the kids to different parts of the world where it is safer. So the places that they were looking at were Australia, New Zealand, because it was down south, and a lot of the tension during the war was happening in the North Hemisphere. So they were trying to essentially protect Britain by preserving British children in the Dominions. So in having the children go to those countries, they needed adults. And one of the adults' name is Ruth. So Ruth is the person whose story we're following, who takes the trip and escorts these children to New Zealand, I believe. New Zealand or Australia, one of the two. And so they take the kids on a ship to New Zealand / Australia. And in the story, we're just following how she's feeling about the war. She's feeling about keeping the children safe. She's feeling about helping these kids settle in these places, because when they move to these really foreign lands, they will have no family other than the kids that were like siblings. So if siblings are together, more often than not, families would take in siblings as opposed to just singles of the children. So that's what happens. So it's just a lot of that. And we see these people trying to keep an upbeat life whilst on the ship, whilst they are soldiers guarding them, boats guarding them, and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed this because I like historical fiction novels, and not necessarily always about war, but I enjoy a little war background where a lot of the war doesn't affect the people entirely, because you get emotionally invested with these people and then they die because of war. So you don't want that. I don't want that. So I really enjoyed that. The story has like an additional layer where this is a story being read and not necessarily just the main story. So somebody is reading Ruth's story, and so that storyline was a little messy for no reason, and we didn't need it. But so we had that along with that, and I think that's what contributed to this being a 3.5-star read as opposed to like a normal 4-star read that I would have given a similar historical fiction type of novel. So that's what we're doing here, and I really, really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that part of the story, not the mess. They were. Ooh, we're not getting into that. The first book in this particular section is Imposter Syndrome. So when I first read Imposter Syndrome, I probably would have given it a 3.5, right, initially. But I read it like a month ago, so I've had enough time to like let it settle. So this is a contemporary fiction novel about a Russian spy lady who has infiltrated Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley is the tech space in America, and she has been put into Silicon Valley to essentially create a company or help build a company, an American company where they gather a lot of people's data. So how they do this is her and the founder of Tangerine, which is the company she essentially infiltrates and becomes one of the most prominent people in, is a company similar to, think Meta. So think your Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp conglomerate put together. Think of that type of setup, but all in one. So that's what Tangerine does. Tangerine does a lot of direct messaging. They do a lot of posts on a feed. They do a lot of like photo sharing, all of that stuff. They do a lot of that stuff. And supposedly all of the stuff is encrypted, right? So all of that stuff is encrypted, but you have the Russian spy lady and the owner having God mode status. So what that means is that they're able to do anything they want without any restriction. Everyone else has restriction based off of the level that they occupy in the company, but her as the COO and the founder have God mode, so they are able to do whatever they want. So once the company is fully fledged and up and running and as successful as it was meant to be, the Russian government then goes, okay, since you're already in there, we need information about these people. And then she sends. Then we need information about these people's locations. Often it was Russian dissidents' information, like people who speak against the Russian government. So they want their location to possibly maybe the people. So we have that story. And then, of course, in these kinds of story, we have to follow the whistleblower's perspective also. In the story, the whistleblower also does a lot of, I don't want to say it's like inconvenient things, but it's a lot of like, okay, I see why you're doing this. It's to like advance the plot, but she does a lot of that. And basically the whistleblower finds out that, hey, somebody's using God mode, which is supposedly something that had to have been deactivated because following a big scandal, they were like, okay, we've shut down God mode, but somebody's using God mode to essentially transfer information out of the company, and that's not allowed. And it's a lot of information, not just like tiny bits of information that wouldn't be like noticed by someone, but like it's large quantities of information. So the whistleblower is basically, so you see, there's just like, you're doing too much. And then she has to find allies to essentially help her get to the FBI to kind of take this woman down. Think of trying to take down Elizabeth Holmes in her peak. That's what this woman is doing. And I think that's what the story is somewhat hinting at, trying to be, but it's not necessarily that. So you have a lot of that happening and you're like, okay, let's keep reading. So when things kind of like happen, like the big crescendo of the story, when it happens, you find yourself going, all of this for that? Oh, wobble. So it was one of those, I liked it at first, but now when I think about it, it was an okay book. Nothing bad, nothing good, but like, you see. The next book on our list is Ghost Mountain. I made a video about Ghost Mountain. But like, as with everything, when you think about like what goes into that video, you realize that I don't really tell you what's happening in the story entirely. I talk about like the main premise, which is basically in this particular town, a mountain like appears out of nowhere. Like, I don't have the patience to go find out how mountains are formed, because I feel like we have all the mountains that we're going to have in this lifetime. So I have no interest in learning about how mountains are formed. There is information out there, but the idea that this thing came out of nowhere, that's the fascinating stuff. So when this story came across my desk, when the story came across to me, I realized that, oh, this is interesting. Okay, so what's happening in the story? A mountain just like appears out of nowhere, and it kind of changes the trajectory of every person's life who lives in that town close to the mountain. So the story is a literary fiction with a hint of magical realism. And the only magical realism aspect of the book is this mountain that came out of nowhere. So it's not like, ooh, no. It's just the mountain. And then everything else is very, very standard fiction with real people, with real stories that make sense and have nothing to really do with the mountain appearing. But the mountain is somewhat a catalyst for a lot of the storylines. The story has a mountain appearing and different people's lives change. For instance, the lady who found the mountain, her dog dies because she got distracted by this mountain that appeared in the place where she walks her dog all the time, and she was very like confused and didn't realize her dog was choking on something. Next thing, you have the town drunk suddenly being included in the discovery of the mountain, but he didn't discover it, but people believe it. So he goes and finds the lady who says he discovered it and has a conversation with her. The conversation leads to a romantic relationship. Like, does that mean that because if the mountain hadn't been there, he would never have spoken to this lady and nothing romantic would have happened, and then they wouldn't have had the child? You see? And then you have this couple who essentially become distant from one another because the wife is so enamored with this mountain and she can't leave the mountain. So she sleeps at the mountain with other people who are also enamored with the mountain. They're called Satanists, unfortunately. And then they start eating food from the vegetation around the mountain, and of course they die because some things are poisonous. And so you see, because of the mountain. So there's so many things that are happening because of the mountain, and I'm not going to get into all the storylines, but that's what's happening. It's just this mountain kind of is the catalyst for a lot of different things that are happening in this particular town, and hence why it's the central object of, I want to say, or of obsession, I guess. I don't know, but because it's not like other than the people who live around the mountain, no one is really enamored with the mountain the same way. But this mountain has caused all of these different storylines to exist. And so I don't know, but that's why I enjoyed reading it, because it was something different and I wanted to see where they were going to go. But you realize this is just a character study about different people's lives happening and things not happening and things happening. It just like, I don't know, I didn't enjoy the repetitive nature of it, but then I remembered this is life. A lot of things are happening and not happening, happening and not happening, happening and not happening. Is that a mountain? Anyway, sorry. The next book on our list is Goodbye Vitamin. Again, this was a book that I included in that video where I was talking about books I'm reading. And so Goodbye Vitamin is, again, another random ass book. So this was a book about this father getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And because of that, his family's lives also changed. His daughter moves back home to look after him. His wife also starts to eat different because she's scared that she might have been a reason why his diagnosis happened when it happened, because they were eating from aluminium pots. So apparently that's too bad. So she's fixated on trying to eat more healthy. The son still doesn't want to speak to his dad, and there's conversations about that. And basically, that's it. Again, you have a central figure who has something happen to him, and then people's lives around him changes. There's nothing interesting about the stories in, what's this thing called? Goodbye Vitamin. Because they try to pull at your heartstrings a little too much for my liking, which basically means that you're reading about how the Alzheimer's is changing this man's life. And then out of nowhere, you have random facts about things that she's interested in finding out because it's just too much. Like, I don't know why we're doing all of that stuff. And then you have a book that her father gave her. In this book, it writes all the really strange questions she used to ask as a child. And then they read it back to us. What are we doing? What are we doing? It was okay. On top of it, another thing that kind of like dampened my mood is that the book is written in a journal diary structure, which means that you're not following a cohesive story. You're just following like parts that somebody wanted you to hear about, which is usually how stories work. But the way it was written felt so disjointed that you're like, what year are we talking about now? So it's that kind of issue. But otherwise, it was an okay book. Nothing bad about it. It was written all right. The stories, you're just like, people living with Alzheimer's or with somebody with Alzheimer's. Nothing crazy there. Nothing crazy there. Lastly, you have Garden of Her Heart by Zoe Richards. Garden of Her Heart was different. So what happens in Garden of Her Heart is that this woman gets attacked at her workplace. So she gets slashed on her face and she becomes very, very, very scared of going outside. She's scared of being seen by people. She's just really, really scared. So because of that, she kind of gets fired from her job and is given a severance package, garden leave, as well as a paid vacation. So during her paid vacation, she decides, you know what, let me go to this wellness retreat. And when we're thinking wellness retreat, we're thinking yoga, meditation, a little bit of exercise here and there, pottery classes, flower class. They do all that stuff, right? They do all of that stuff. And I love it for her because the person who walks into that facility is completely different by the time the book is done. She is able to make friends. She's less insecure about her scar on her face because she realizes that she's a really, really good person and a bad thing happened to her. That doesn't mean she doesn't deserve to continue to live life. And the people at the retreat are so kind to her. The only reason that it sits here is because there's a lot of attempt to kind of make this a very heartwarming story, which it is already, but there's times when you're like, you're trying to pull on my heartstrings for no reason here. Like certain storylines, you're like, what are we doing? We don't need to go that far to feel how we feel about this woman. We like her. We don't need to like her anymore by putting her in situations that an ordinary person wouldn't find themselves. She has this weird fear about the media, but that's because when she was growing up, her mom kind of like put her in the limelight too much after her sister passed away from an exploded science kit, right? So her mom would put her in front of the media, the press, just to gather more support around taking these science kits out of the market. And so when her mom breaks down on TV, the media turned on her. The media turns on her, and then they turned on the daughter. So she finds that the media kind of make things really, really awkward for her. So she's not very, very happy about it. So when one of the journalists who comes to the retreat is talking about how he wants to make a story about her, she feels so against it because she has a bad experience with the media. But her response to that is weird because she goes into the garden and just stays in the garden by like fixing the garden because I think it gives her some sort of like peace. But at the same time, it's like your reaction is so big because you can't just go speak to people or ask people or believe people who say, no one's talking about you. No one's talking about you. She freaks out and you're like, girl, please, you're doing so well. Now you're letting this creepy guy who everyone says is creepy and annoying like affect you this much. And it's like, and the effect, you're like, okay, I understand you're going through a tough time, but like this much, girl, please. And that's why it's not like a a 4-star read, because we're doing too much with very little information to back up why she would feel this way. So I don't know. So the only book that I did not finish for this month that I actually started reading is My Husband's Wife. So My Husband's Wife, the only reason I didn't finish it is because I'm working on a chapter to chapter breakdown for the channel. So I did the first 3 chapters, or rather the first 3 sections will be up. So that's the only reason I have the most amount of fun with this book. If this book were a book that I finished, it would be sitting with the grades, and it would probably have a 4.5 star rating, and that would show you how much I enjoy this particular book. But I didn't finish it because the month of May decided to be as short as it was, so I didn't finish it. But I was still able to like get a chunk of the reading done, so I'm excited about that. I still need to read the rest of the chapters. I think I'm at the end of chapter 36 by the time this video goes up, and so by the time June ends, I'll come back and I'll give you guys a rating, because I'm not done and I don't know how they're going to conclude that story. But so far the mystery is phenomenal stuff. I think this is the only thriller that's on my list. Yeah, it is. So maybe that's why I love it so much more than I love every other book on this list. But it's not a true DNF. It's simply a DNF based off of like the time I've given myself to read and what the monthly wrap up is based off of. I hope you guys have enjoyed hanging out with me while we talk about all the books that I've read. If you have read any of the books that I've talked about, let me know. And comment down below what books you'd be interested in reading. Don't forget to like the video if you've liked what I've done. I know at some points I felt like very, very disappointed, because I was disappointed in like some of my mids. I was expecting too much because I went in expecting too much, and I think that's my downfall most of the time. If I just walk in without caring what the book is going to be about, it's probably going to sit with like more higher ranked books in my mind, but that's just how I function. So for now, if you have enjoyed what I've done, don't forget to like the video, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, and then don't forget to share the video with all your friends. So yeah, anyway, bye guys. The mids, the last book in our, so the book on this list, book on our list